Good morning.
Good morning, Carl.
Good morning. Trying to get the attention of the people in the back. I have a few announcements, as usual, before the service begins. First, some good news. A few weeks ago, Holly Tangui made a matching grant challenge. She promised to match up to $700 of any contributions made before the end of December. Holly's generosity inspired yours, and before 2023 arrived, $1,400 had been raised for the church. Thanks to those who responded to Holly's generosity, and thanks especially to Holly for her initiative. The church's annual membership meeting will be held 2 weeks from today, Sunday, January 22nd. We will meet downstairs after the worship service. After 2 years of Zoom, this in-person meeting with lunch will be a treat. Please be there to vote on the officers and the budget and discuss plans for 2023. Today, please share with us a hot lunch after the service. We are doing this on a bi-weekly schedule. It is free and for visitors and members alike. There is always enough for all. After the service, follow the crowd out the door behind me. Finally, mark 10:30 a.m. Wednesday, February 1st. Is it Wednesday? Anyway, it's February 1st in your calendars. That is when the book group will meet in the historical room, which is behind that door over there, to discuss Horse, a novel by Pulitzer Prize winner Geraldine Brooks, starring a black trainer and his Derby-winning horse in the American South in the days of slavery. Thank you.
Good morning. Welcome to the Gloucester Unitarian Universalist Church. It's wonderful to see you all here today. Welcome to anybody who's watching us from home this morning. We're happy to have you joining with us as well. And here we are. Christmas has ended. The 12th day of Christmas was Friday. The new year has begun. And it's always a hard day to come in here with the decorations gone. We look bare and back to what we call ordinary time. And I'm sure you're all feeling the same way about your living rooms. But at any rate, but it's wonderful to be here. And just want to welcome everybody warmly. And to say that one of the things that I do enjoy doing is meeting with folks. So if we haven't had a chance to talk in a while, or if you don't know me well, I would encourage you to make an appointment and we can get together. I'd love to spend some time with you. We are a welcoming congregation, which means that we affirm the full inclusion of people of all sexual orientations and gender identities. We are designated that way by the Unitarian Universalist Association. We take it very seriously. And just want to, what have I been thinking about this week? One of the things that is very much on my mind right now is continuing to try to bring our community back in all of its ways to where we were before the pandemic. And one of the ways that we really are trying to focus on building ourselves back up again is to be enhancing our choir. We have been have had a long and proud tradition of choral music here at this church, and we would love to rebuild that. So if you're at all interested in singing with the choir, this would be a wonderful opportunity now to join in. And if you have friends that you think might like to, we also would encourage that as well. So think about that seriously. It really enhances our worship life here, and we value it. So, and thank you to you three this morning for being here. And with that, let us deepen our hearts and our spirits for worship.
Gathered here in the mystery of the hour, gathered here in one strong body, gathered here in the struggle and the power. Spirit, draw near. Gathered here in the mystery of the hour, gathered here in the mystery of the hour, gathered here is one strong body, gathered here in the struggle and the power. Spirit, draw near. Gathered here in one strong body, gathered here in the struggle and the power. Spirit, draw near.
Our call to worship this morning is by Reverend Matthew Johnson. For 5,000 years or more than 15,000 generations, human beings have been invoking spiritual power. My predecessors and yours have gathered together to make sense of their lives and their place in the cosmos. And they have spoken aloud and invited what they conceived as sacred and powerful to be with them. Every group of people, everywhere, they gathered to make sense of their lives and to make sense of their place in the cosmos. And they called these spirits to be present to them. And so do we. So do we. We gather this morning to make sense of ourselves and this universe in which we live as best we are able. And we call ourselves to worship together, and we invoke the power and the wonder of life itself, that to which spirits of animals and memories of heroes pointed the way. We invoke that power which is, as we know, always around, always with us, but which we sometimes forget about. We forget that we are part of the whole of creation. We forget that we are stardust. We forget that we are capable of miracles, first among them, that we can love. We forget these things, so we invoke the power of existence so that we can remember, so that we can lift our eyes and open our ears to the true and the beautiful. For 5,000 years or more, we have done this. In many tongues, in many ways, we have done this. And so we continue that ancient tradition in our way and in our time. And so let us worship together. Our opening hymn is number 112 in your gray hymnal, Do You Hear? In our faith tradition, we begin our service with the kindling of our chalice. The flame of our chalice this morning is a symbol of the warmth and the brightness of our connections, and it lights our way forward into our shared future as a community. And if you have a candle or a chalice prepared at home, I invite you to light it with us now. I invite us now to share the words of our covenant. Newcomers and guests, the words are printed in your order of service if you wish to read along with us. In the light of truth and the warmth of love, we gather to seek, to sustain, and to share. Life is a gift for which we are grateful. We gather in community to celebrate the glories and the mysteries of this great gift. And as we've been doing for almost a year now, we will light our candle in hopes for peace, as always for the nation of Ukraine and everywhere in the world that is suffering from violence and cruelty and oppression.
once upon a time, there was a young woman who was finding her entry into adulthood to be kind of rocky. She was actually pretty miserable. She just felt like life was just such a struggle. And she went to her dad one day and she just said, I just can't manage this. I just feel as though every time a problem crops up and I solve it, then instantly another one crops up, and I'm struggling all the time. And of course, most of us would just nod and say, well, sounds like adulthood. But her father just looked at her and he didn't say anything, but he led her into the kitchen. And he was a cook. So he put 3 pots of water on to boil. She was mystified. She's like, I asked you a question. So when the water boiled, he put potatoes in the first pot. Then he put some eggs in the second pot. And he ground up some coffee and put the coffee grounds into a third pot. And then he, again, didn't say anything. He just stood and waited for it to boil. And after about 20 minutes, he shut the water off. And he put the potatoes in a bowl, and he put the eggs in a bowl. And then he poured a cup of coffee. And she said, Dad, what are you doing? What does this have to do with what I asked? You might be wondering the same thing. And so he said to her, I want you to feel the potatoes. And she did. And he said, how do they feel? And she said, well, they're soft. And he said, great, now take an egg and break it. And so she broke the egg, broke the shell, and peeled some of the shell away, and the egg was hard. And he then invited her to have some coffee, and she took a sip of the coffee, and since she was a Unitarian Universalist, the smell and the taste of the coffee brought a big smile to her face. And so she said, okay, Dad, what does this all mean? And he said, each one of these substances met with adversity in the case of the boiling water. And each of these reacted differently to the boiling water. The potatoes went into the water hard as rocks and came out soft. The eggs went in incredibly fragile and liquid, in fact, but they came out hard. And the coffee did the most amazing thing at all. Not only did it react to the water, but it changed the water. It affected the adverse condition it was in. It made it into something else. So what's this all about? Well, as we know, there is adversity all around us. We confront it every day in many ways. And we don't get to choose often what happens to us, what the circumstances are. But we do get to choose how we respond, whether we will be softened or hardened or changed into something else. Thanks for listening.
The author E.B. White once famously wrote, "It is hard to know when to respond to the seductiveness of the world and when to respond to its challenge. If the world were merely seductive, that would be easy. If it were merely challenging, that would be no problem. But I arise in the morning torn between the desire to improve the world and a desire to enjoy the world. This makes it hard to plan the day." And so I invite us now to join in our responsive reading, which is printed as an insert in your order of service. And please read the italicized portions. I rise in the morning torn between the desire to save the world or to savor it, to serve life or to enjoy it, to savor the sweet taste of my own joy, or to share the bitter cup of my neighbor.
To celebrate life with its death,
When the glow which lights my day illumines the hurting world around me, to savor the world or save it. God of justice, if such there be, take from me the burden of my question.
Let me praise my multitude without limit. Let me cast my eyes on all trouble.
No, you will not let me be. You will not stop my ears to the cries of the hurt and the hungry. You will not close my eyes to the sight of the afflicted.
What is that you say? To save the one who serves, to save the one who saves, the one who stands without the other.
Forgive me. In my preoccupation with myself, in my concern for my own life, I had forgotten. Forgive me, God of justice. Forgive me and make me whole. I invite us now into a time of prayer to be followed by silent meditation. The first part of our prayer this morning is by the Reverend Joe Cherry. Source of life and love, this is my prayer. Please let the center hold. The center is what holds our faith together. The strength of the center is what allows us to stretch farther into the future, to the unknown, the untried, the uncertain, the unnerving, the places where growth happens. Let the center be strong. May the strength of the center strengthen us as we seek, as we embody compassion, work for equity, demand justice for all. Let our center hold, strong as an old oak tree, flexible as a willow tree, life-giving as an orange tree, evergreen as the pine tree, and as beautiful as the almond tree in blossom. Spirit of life, help us to live from a center of compassion and courage. We ask your presence with loved ones who are ill or in pain, who are lonely and grieving. May they feel our love as we hold them in our thoughts today, as we enter into silence. Amen.
Now is the time in our service when we offer our commitment and generosity. We are here today because of the love and faith of the generations of members and friends who believed in this community and who have gone before us. We carry on the work they began and will shepherd the story forward for those who follow us. For the life and health of this congregation and its ministries, this morning's offering will now be gratefully received. Thank you for your generosity. The reading today is Like Pendulums We Swing by Don Von Furster. Like pendulums, we swing from hunger to hunger, from hunger for the one great truth, absolute, eternal, and mystical, to hunger for the simple, near-in, familiar truths that change as we change, grow as we grow. Like pendulums, we swing from hunger for cosmic imperatives commanding us to expand ourselves, to hunger for immediate and authentic inner promptings urging us to be ourselves. We would be right with heaven, so we swing outward. We would fulfill our own hearts, so we swing inward. We would grasp the holy, and we would create our own selves. We have this dual hunger to serve the cosmos that commands us to become more than we would, and to be our genuine selves, content with what we are. So we ride this pendulum in hunger for life. We ride from truth that calls us out to truths that call us in. And all because the gravity of life pulls along across our hunger, never allowing us to stay just on one side or the other, always moving us into new urgency for the wholeness that would bind and the personal. And so life pulls us and we swing from truth to truths, from cosmos to self, from mystery to clarity, from out to in. It is our state to swing and to be drawn ever into another swing. This is the motion that makes ours a human life. The great gravity of life pulls along an unknown holy axis. May it never let the pendulums we are cease their swinging until the truth we seek and the truths we are one.
There is a moment when we are watching the swinging of a pendulum, when there's a slowing, a pause, before the pendulum begins to swing back in the other direction. And picture this with me for just a moment. Envision that moment, and then that little hesitation, that almost imperceptible space for a fleeting second when nothing happens. This week I have found myself thinking about divers, especially high divers. We watch them compete, maybe during the Olympic Games, and we see them walk out onto that platform, get into position, and then stop. And as we watch, as the crowd goes silent, they gather themselves, and then they fling themselves out into the air. And hold that image in your head. We're going to come back to that. Our spiritual theme this month is finding our center. We think and talk quite a bit about the idea of centering in our faith tradition. We see the value in learning how to quell the noise, how to practice calming ourselves, quieting our minds, practicing going deep within ourselves to find truths about ourselves. Centering is important work, and it's valuable, even for its own sake. In this noisy and busy culture that surrounds us, with all of the demands on our time and our attention, it serves us well to practice creating a safe and a quiet space within our center. Often we think that the exploration of our center, the act of centering, is the end in itself. We feel accomplished during those rare moments when we feel that we have broken through the noise and been able to quiet the monkey mind of random thoughts that so readily come to the surface as soon as we sit and close our eyes. That felt good, we think, as we savor the momentary sense of peace. I'll try that again tomorrow, or maybe Thursday, if I can find the time. But regardless of our intentions, we do love that idea of simply sitting at peace. Now let me ask you this. What if the high diver simply walked out to the end of the platform and stayed there? What if the pendulum stopped at the end of its swing? What if the practice of centering ourselves is not the end, but rather the means to an end? For the diver doesn't stay there, perched at the end of the platform. She takes a moment to gather her muscles and her thoughts, and then she launches herself. And a pendulum doesn't stop. It changes direction. Ultimately, we work to center ourselves, not simply to live with equanimity, to float along in a state of calmness and wisdom, but rather so that we are positioned to respond to the forces of life that are always swirling around us. Like the winds here on Cape Ann, shifting, coming from different directions, life will make conflicting demands of us. We are not meant to hide in our centers, to rest there, but rather to use what we learn there to know how to respond. I rise in the morning torn between the desire to save the world or to savor it, to serve life or to enjoy it. When do we serve, and when do we rest? When are we satisfied with what we see around us, and when do we respond to the pricking of our conscience, to a call to leap off the diving platform, to change direction and swing? As Carl read a few minutes ago, like pendulums, we swing from hunger for cosmic imperatives commanding us to expand ourselves, to hunger for immediate and authentic inner promptings urging us to be ourselves. Centering ourselves, then, is more than just an attempt to steady ourselves. It is an inquiry, a search for a call, and for what drives us forward. It is finding balance between the different demands and finding a place to be whole. Centering, finding our center, is also about finding purpose. In the story we heard earlier, we learned that different objects respond differently when placed in boiling water. How do we respond to those uncomfortable plunges? Circumstances vary, certainly, and so we find ourselves responding differently as the situation requires. But how do we know in each instance what our purpose is, what our next right action is? How do we remember, in the heat of that boiling water, what our purpose is? I had a challenging day yesterday. It's nothing dire, but for a variety of reasons throughout the day, I was completely unable to stay in a calm and centered place or to get any work done. We've all been there. And as sometimes happens, as the day wore on and the sun started to set, I began to worry about whether I would actually be able to prepare this morning's service. A voice in my head started to helpfully suggest that you all wouldn't mind if I decided to substitute an old sermon or have some poetry. They'd understand, said the helpful voice. And you are a kind bunch, and I think you would understand. But I had to tell the helpful voice to quiet down and get out of the way. And in the end, my own values wouldn't let me stay standing on the diving board. I had to dive in. I'm sharing this with you this morning to explain the kind of centering we're talking about here. That search for a way forward, that response to a call or to a situation, and the effort to find balance between competing paths. Our responses, our convictions, and our callings, and our purpose comes from our deepest values. When we seek our center, what we are actively doing is connecting with our core values. What drives us forward? What propels us off the diving board? The concept of being centered that we are most familiar with implies rest, quiet, and balance. But in fact, being centered is what allows us to make decisions, what propels us to choose how to move, not to stay in that calm space that we all crave, that still point, but how to move through it. Can you name your deepest held values? I realized yesterday that one of mine is that I will not stop trying. I started laughing to myself because I took some family members on a tour of Dogtown on New Year's Day, and one of them asked me, "What's your favorite boulder?" And of course my favorite boulder is Help Mother. But I realized that my second favorite boulder, and I go to see every time I'm in Dogtown, is never try, never win. There's my value. But what might be your strongest value? Do you know your top 5? Can you usually live by them? Do you find yourself hungering more for peace within yourself or for more action in the world? I'm going to invite us all to spend this week exploring these questions. And if you want, I can offer you some resources to help you with your inquiry. And then what I'd like to do next Sunday after coffee hour is to have one of our Soul Matters gatherings. And anybody who wants to, I'd like to invite to come together, and we can have a conversation about some of what we've discovered, about our values, and about our center. Our author wrote, "We have this dual hunger to serve the cosmos that commands us to become more than we would, and to be our genuine selves, content with what we are." And so we ride this pendulum in a hunger for life. We ride from the truth that calls us out to the truths that call us in. And all because the gravity of life pulls across our hunger, never allowing us to stay on one side or the other, always moving us into new urgency for the wholeness that would bind both the cosmic and the personal. We are riding a pendulum that pulls us across our center over and over, but doesn't allow us to stay there in that center. We are surrounded by shifting winds and sand and tides. Life, we know, is a process, always changing, always calling us forward. We do not get to choose whether or not to move with the winds, with the pendulum, but we do get to choose how. Does the situation call for us to respond like a potato, like an egg, or like coffee beans? Any one of these requires us to transform in different ways. Do we become softer or harder or a different substance altogether? We can't know until we are confronted with the need to shift, to move. But what we need to know, what each of us needs to know about ourselves, is what we hold at our very core, what motivates us, what urges us to take a step, first one, and then another. What is your center urging you to do? How do you know if it's right? My friends, this is the work of a lifetime. And here we can engage these questions and seek to ride the pendulum together. I hope you will join me. Blessed be. Amen. I invite us now to share in our unison prayer from the New Zealand Book of Common Prayer. It's printed in your order of service.
Eternal Spirit, earth maker, pain bearer, life giver, source of all that is and that shall be, Father and Mother of us all, loving God, who moves heaven, the hallowing of your name echo through the universe. The way of your justice be followed by the peoples of the world. Your heavenly will be done by all created beings. Your commonwealth of peace
Our closing hymn is number 108 in your gray hymnal, My Life Flows On in Endless Song.
Life goes on in endless song, above earth's lamentation. I hear the real, though far off hymn, and hail some new creation. Through all the tumult and the strife, I hear the music ringing. It sounds an echo in my soul. How can I keep from singing? What though the tempest round me roars? I know the truth it liveth. But though the darkness round me close, songs in the night it giveth. No storm can shake my inmost calm, while to that rock I'm clinging. Since love prevails in heaven and earth, how can I keep from singing? When tyrants tremble as they hear the bells of freedom ringing, when friends rejoice both far and near, how can I keep from singing? To prison cell and dungeon vile, our thoughts to them are clinging. When friends by shame are undefiled, how can I keep from singing?
May you know your deepest longings and the beliefs that animate you. May you know the callings of your heart and what gives you purpose. If you found connection here, may you carry it outward beyond this place and extend it to others. If you have found peace, may you hold it in your heart until we return to one another here. I invite us now to read the words to extinguish our flame, the flame of our chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Go in peace, return in love. Amen.